This video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you need a website or domain, check out squarespace.com. Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video. Are you looking to ramp up your skill as a photographer and get to the next level? In this video, I'm going to go over 5 easy tips to implement what is the #1 skill I think that all great photographers have. That is thinking in 3 dimensions, allowing them to get photos like this, this, and this. If you stay till the end, I'll share the bonus tip that allows me to get photos like this and this. My name is Simon D'Entremont, and I'm a professional nature and wildlife photographer living in Eastern Canada. I make weekly videos giving you photo tips or taking you behind the scenes for nature photography. Subscribe if you want to see more. Now I'm a nature and wildlife photographer, so my photo examples will reflect this, but these principles will apply to any type of photography. So why is seeing and thinking in 3 dimensions so important in photography? And why is this a skill that advanced photographers all seem to have? People who see in 3D automatically are by definition thinking about more than just the subject, which really makes a pretty photo by itself. These photos are all of snowy owls, but it's the environment and background that makes the shot, not just the subject. People who visualize in 3 dimensions are also usually more conscious of the light and the direction from which it's coming. Front light, side light, and backlight all give different looks to a photo, and 3-dimensional thinkers are considering this before taking the shot. And finally, 3D thinkers are conscious of their place in space relative to the subject and are actively thinking about the perspective they should use to get the best photo out of any particular situation. So here are 5 tips to get you thinking in 3 dimensions. One is using an autofocus background and foreground along with the subject. The reason this works is that our minds instinctively think of a sharp object in front of or behind a blurry one as having a quality of being captured in space, a thin slice of sharpness in the middle of the field of view. It isn't complicated for our minds to figure out that this, in this photo of mine, is in front of this, or that this is behind that. This gives our photos a foreground, midground, and background that makes the subject pop and appear to have been captured with more intention, not a fluke. Like this water splashing in front of the sandpiper, or grasses in front of the snowy owl. Sometimes these happen naturally in my environment, and many people would move to get these out of the way, treating them as obstructions or, things in the way. I don't see them that way at all. Rather, seeing them as additional dimensions to my photo. In many cases, I move sideways to intentionally add them to the shot, like these dandelions in bloom in front of this fox kit. The tip here is when you find an interesting subject, your next line of thinking should be, what can I place in front of it or behind it to give it more depth? What lines can lead to my subject? What structures can help make my photo stand out from a snapshot of convenience that looks like you just raised up the camera to your eye and went click? By the way, walking around and looking for framing using the back LCD flipped out is a really handy tool for this. The second trick to think and work in 3D is to get the right alignment of subject and background. Photographers who think 3-dimensionally are always actively looking for this alignment, fortuitous or arranged, of subject and background that bring 2 cool elements together in one photo. My buddy's plane and this harvest moon is one example. We needed to plan out the shot in advance to get him to fly just in the right place and at the right time. This yielded this, and this shot. By the way, apps can help you plan out shots like this, like Photo Pills, which I used for this one, or the setting sun and this lighthouse. I needed to think in 3 dimensions to know that as the sun set, getting that moment just right and standing at just the right spot at the right time would allow me to capture the sun star. I pre-positioned myself to where I thought the angle would work, and I was about 1 foot off when it happened. Shooting a solar eclipse is another example, maybe an obvious one. Neither of these elements individually would have made the same shot. It's the 2 pieces together that work. The tip here, when you're walking around, see through your subject to the background and always be on the lookout for alignments that you can get. Then play with the angle to get the perspective just right. I move around to get the background I want behind the subject all the time, like moving the vehicle sideways to get the warm sun on trees in the background behind this leopard. Or this reflection of the sunrise in apartment building windows behind the sparrow. Or timing a crashing wave behind this snowy owl. These are not flukes. I'd like to thank the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. I built my own website using Squarespace and it was a breeze. It's a great all-in-one solution to host your company presence or yourself, show off your work, engage with your clients and followers, and sell products and services. There are lots of useful templates, including the ones for specific genres like photography, which is mine. But the place to go is the new Design Intelligence feature, combining Squarespace's experience and cutting-edge AI, empowering you to tailor your own build to your own specific needs with a little bit of help. A website is also one of the best ways to monetize your work by setting up an online store. You can use Squarespace payments, which you can set up with just a few clicks, and give your customers lots of ways to pay like Klarna, ACH Direct Debit, Apple Pay, and Afterpay. Go to squarespace.com to sign up for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Simon for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. The third tip is to add 3D to your subject itself by using sideways direct light. Now, why does this work? It's because even front illumination from a light like the sun behind your back will fully illuminate your subject quite evenly. The same for backlight, which leaves no shadows on your subject. But side light adds something unique. Parts of your subject will be illuminated and parts not, left in shadow. This contrast between lit and shadowy parts makes the subject look much more three-dimensional. Like these elephants on the Chobe River in Botswana. If they were evenly lit, it would be boring. Backlit is okay, but lacks a lot of features, but the side light, highlighting the craggy folds of skin and shapely trunks, adds a beautiful touch to what would be an ordinary photo. This crocodile shot of mine was another that had great shapes and structures that were made prettier with nice side light, this time from the warm setting sun. For this to work, the light should be somewhat direct and strong, like sunlight or an artificial light. Cloudy days and soft light will have light bouncing all over the place, which will fill in the shadows and make the bright areas less bright, messing up the effect. A prime example of where you should apply this strategy is photographing the moon. People often try to photograph the moon when it's full, thinking that this is when it's at its best. I'm afraid not. That's the worst time to photograph it. Why? No shadows. The best time to take pics of the moon is during one of the other phases where it's partly lit from the side. This creates a boundary along the two sides called the terminator, where shadows will exaggerate structures along this boundary, making it more 3D. In processing, you can maximize this effect by adding contrast or using the clarity slider in Lightroom, making the bright areas brighter and the dark areas darker. Use this trick the next time you photograph the moon. My fourth tip to think three-dimensionally is to capitalize on situations where there's different lighting for the subject and the background. Like in these photos of mine, the subject is in the shade, but the background is in the sun. These two effects together give your photo a very unique perspective that stands out. When you're out in full sun, don't forget to try and find subjects in the shade. Getting them in the shade with a fully lit background is sometimes better than right out in the sun, where the light can be very, very harsh. The trick is to expose the photo as brightly as you can without blowing out the background, which often will be much brighter than the subject. Use the histogram and make sure it's not touching on the right-hand side. If the shade is dark enough, go for the silhouette, like this waxwing shot of mine. The more identifiable by its shape the subject is, the better, like these elephants or giraffes. Pick an angle where the subject's key attributes are obvious. Alternatively, subject in the light, environment in the shade works very well, like the setting sun illuminating these sandpipers, or the sun illuminated crashing surf while the foreground waves were in the shade. The tip, look for scenarios where the subject and environment are lit differently and use the difference to make the photo unique. My fifth technique to get you thinking in 3D, and of which advanced photographers are very aware, is that getting close exaggerates the size of elements in the foreground more than the background. Now, what do I mean by this? Check out this photo of a lighthouse. The rock structure in the foreground is only a few feet, maybe 1 meter across, yet it looks really large in the scene. That's because I got 1 meter away from it for the shot. With a wide-angle lens, objects close to the camera will be exaggerated in size quite a bit. But that's not the trick by itself. When I went from 2 meters away from the rock structure to 1 meter, it got much larger in the frame as I cut the distance in half. But I only got, let's say, 1% closer to the lighthouse. And here's the point. changing the relative size of the foreground and background to each other. That's right, if you want to photograph two things in a photo, by changing your distance to the foreground element, you can manipulate the relative size of the two elements to each other. Like these plants in the water. If I got closer, their visual weight in the photo would be too large to balance the top of the frame. Farther back and they would be too small to fill the bottom of the frame like I wanted. The tip, move forward and backward from your foreground element to get it the size that you want in the frame to get the right visual balance and composition. Or this lighthouse in front of a solar eclipse. The sun and moon sizes wasn't going to change regardless of where I stood. The size of the lighthouse relative to the field of view and the eclipse were the only variables I had to play with. And by the way, you can get really close. In this shot, I'd like the rock shaped like a sperm whale and the pattern in the sand. How far away? Less than a foot, about 20 centimeters. Make really small things in the scene really big in your photo for dramatic effect by getting close. Don't just think up, down, right, left in 2D. Add that third dimension by thinking, how close should I get? What's your favorite tip to get your brain thinking in 3D? Let us know in the comments below. And now for my bonus tip to help you think and take photos three-dimensionally. Reflections. What else is there that creates more of a sense of an extra dimension than a good reflection? These give a great sense of another world, another dimension that's yet to be explored or lives alongside us at the same time. Whenever you're out there trying to find photo opportunities, look for water or glass. Both of these are just dying to give you another viewpoint for your subject. You can even play tricks with these and fool your viewers, like this water so smooth that you might not have figured out that this duck was upside down. A few tips for getting good reflections. 1, no wind is really important for smooth water and great reflections. Secondly, move up and down to play with the angle, as it will really change what's seen in the reflection. More or less sky or background or subject. The angle defines it. If you thought this video was deserving, please give it a like, and I hope that you can use these tips the very next time you go out to get your own unique and amazing photos. I know you can do it.